Samaritan, and it happens to be another one of Jolene's favorites, so I felt that was important to share. The Good Samaritan, an expert in the law of Moses, stood up and asked Jesus a question to see what he would say. Teacher, he asked, "What must I do to have eternal life?" Jesus answered, "It is written by the Scriptures. How do you understand?" The man replied, "The Scriptures say, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and mind. They also say, love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said, "You have the right answer. If you do this, you will have eternal life." But the man wanted to show that he knew what he was talking about. So he asked Jesus, "Who are my neighbors?" Jesus replied, "As a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, robbers attacked him and grabbed him everything he had. They beat him up and ran off, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, but when he saw the man, he walked by on the other side. Later, a temple helper came to the same place, but when he saw the man who had been beaten up, he also went on the other side. A man from Samaria then came traveling along that road. When he saw the man, he felt sorry for him and went over to him. He treated his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put him on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. The next morning, he gave the innkeeper 2 silver coins and said, "Please take care of the man. If you spend more than this on him, I will pay you when I return." Then Jesus asked, "Which one of these 3 people was a real neighbor to the man who was beaten up by robbers?" The teacher answered, "The one who showed pity." Jesus said, "Go and do the same."
The story of the Good Samaritan is one of my favorites. Makes it even more so because I got an A for my sermon that I delivered. Go back. The year was 2007, and it was the month of June, and I was going to Eden Seminary taking advanced courses for my doctorate. And I thought, hey, an advanced preaching course would be good. See what I can learn. And so my teacher told everybody, you can't use written material. You have to preach from your heart. You have to do it extemporaneously. And I've been thinking, yes! Oh, I'm going to have fun in this class. I'm really going to enjoy it. Because pulpits and, me and pulpits just don't get along with each other. And so she said, you can preach anything you want. You have a time limit, okay? And so I decided, of all the stories that Jesus told, I chose the Good Samaritan. And what I wanted to do was to really explain this story, because I had read it many times, but didn't really thoroughly understand what Jesus was trying to say. I'm not Jewish. I didn't live in the first century. And I really didn't understand his audience at that time when I first read it. But now I have a much deeper understanding of what he was trying to say. Jesus really is trying to explain who is our neighbor. And he starts out talking about the Good Samaritan. Now, I want you to envision, this is the 21st century. You live in Glendale, okay? Very large Armenian population. Who do the Armenians absolutely hate?
Turks.
The Turks. There are no good Turks, right? That's the way they've been taught by their parents and their grandparents. And so there's all this hatred for something that happened in 1912. So the way I started out my sermon, I said, I want you to imagine that I'm high up on the pulpit and I'm speaking to an Armenian Orthodox church. And I'll say, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you the story of the Good Turk. And I can imagine what kind of a reaction I'd have. There'd be kind of tightening of the jaws and there are no good Turks, how dare you. That's exactly what Jesus' audience heard when he talked about the Good Samaritan. And he talks about, first, a man, we don't know who he is, we don't know where he's from. He's on that road from Jerusalem to Jericho, one of the most dangerous roads that anybody could travel. And then you kind of wonder, well, why did he go by himself? Remember, this is not a real story. This is a story that Jesus tells. And he's traveling down the road, and some robbers beat him up. And you can imagine what he looked like. I'm sure he was all bloody and all bashed in, and they took everything that he owned. He had nothing except for his battered body. And first, he's encountered by a priest. And the priest keeps on walking down the road and doesn't do a thing. Now, when I first read this story, I thought to myself, how awful. No wonder the clergy don't have a good reputation. But there was a reason for that. Because if you were a follower of the law, you would realize that a priest would become ritually unclean if he touched blood. Blood is what makes you ritually unclean. So if he had gone and aided the man, he would not have been able to function as a priest for a whole month. I did not know that when I first read that story. And then later on, a temple helper, someone that also works in the temple, same thing, walks down there, sees the guy, off he goes. Also, he would have been ritually unclean and could not function in the temple. Now, Jesus, as you remember, was sort of a situational ethicist. He realized that it's important to follow the law, but also there's situations where you need to lend a helping hand. And it might be even on the Sabbath. It doesn't matter. Here was a person in distress. So who does he choose to help the poor man? A Samaritan. They were the most hated people that the Jews could even think about in the first century. And nothing really had happened in that century. We're talking about centuries back. The Samaritans sided with a country called Assyria. And what they did is that they went into people's homes when they were exiled and occupied them. And so when people came back, guess who they found in their home? Some stranger had taken it over. Those were the Samaritans. They were like the first cousins of the Jewish people. They had scriptures almost identical. They worshipped in the same way. They believed in one God. They had similar laws and things like that. But because of what they had done, they had sided with the enemies. There are no good Samaritans. So in this story, it's the Samaritan who takes pity on this fellow, sees what the problem is. I mean, he's almost dead. and he takes him and he puts oil and he puts wine, that's what they use it for as a disinfectant, bandages him, puts him on his donkey, I think it was, and then gets him to the inn, and then asks the inn taker to take care of him and gives him money so that he can do that. And so Jesus asked the important question, now who, was the good neighbor? You don't think of Samaritans as being your neighbors. They're all evil, 100% of them. That's the way they were brought up. A lot of us have been brought up that a certain group of people are our enemies. They're no good. So that you can't use them as an example of a good neighbor. But Jesus was different. He saw all people created by God in God's image. And as again I say, there is no junk that God creates. And so the man is asked by Jesus, and who was the good neighbor? Now he couldn't really come to say the Samaritan, but at least he got the point. The person who showed pity was the neighbor. He recognized that compassion that someone had, even though you think of a Samaritan as an enemy, it was the person who showed pity. And I think today, right now, I have students in my class that I may not have next fall. Some of them are undocumented. One of my students a year ago was in a detainment center with his mother because of their lack of paperwork. I don't know what happened. I don't know if they got a lawyer or what, but it was like a month later he returned to school. I have another student in my class from Guatemala. I talked to his father about their situation. They are not here legally. Is he my neighbor? I sure hope so. They came here from a very rural area in Guatemala. Very, very dangerous. Militia were people from all different kinds of persuasions are fighting over there. And on top of that, he's a special needs child. There is no education in his community for people that have his disabilities. And so they walked from Guatemala to the border and somehow got over. They could never leave the country, or they'd certainly get arrested. They would never be able to come back. And I'm thinking, is he my neighbor? I hope so. He and his family, they're very, very supportive of our program. Also gives me a job. Wonderful, wonderful kid. And so was the other one who was in the detainment camp. I found out a number of years ago that my grandmother came here undocumented. But that's okay. I'm German. They were accepted. She came with her aunt, who came here legally to get married, but she just came along for the ride on a boat. And she just kind of came in, blended in with everyone, ended up in San Francisco. That was okay. I think about who's my neighbor. My neighbor is anyone, really, who I come in contact with. Some of them are really nice, and some of them are really sticky, and some of them are like, I don't know, one way or another. But the thing is, I know that God created each and every one of us. And people, no matter where they're from, can be very nice. I've been rescued in my life by people who are very different than me. I was in an area in Inglewood that was a little spooky at nighttime. And I had a car that was always dying out. And there I was, ready to enter a freeway. And an African-American gentleman saw me in distress, and he says, I don't want you to be around here at this time of night. And so He helped get my car started so I could go on the way. When I fell down at school one time, because I wasn't watching where I was going and hit one of those bumps, it was one of our custodians, who happens to be from Mexico, was the one that picked me up. Even though a lot of other people were there, he was the one that picked me up off the ground and made sure I was all right. They're all my neighbors. They're all God's children. Let us think about the story that Jesus told. He wanted to use an example of the most despised people he could ever think of to tell that story, to get this across to them. Your neighbor is anyone. It can be anyone, especially one that sees you as a human being and aids you when you need help. May we all be neighbors to each other. Amen.
Amen.